Hello. Hey.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I was here for, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes earlier and uh, no one showed up.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. I mean, I understand.
I still have to get used to all the calendars. They say 18 o'clock, and I had to remember that 6. It's and also I was just deep into we're building a
Yeah, I thought
virtual
I had it.
thing.
I thought I had it backwards because our clocks just reset this past weekend, so I thought I had it wrong.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's got me all messed up because I'm used to it being 6 hours different with New York, and now it's 5. Yeah. Anyways, but yeah. So, what did you have to talk about today? Because I'm sure you have a lot of interesting things to talk about.
I have a couple of things. The something I've been working on this whole week, just kind of off and on, is um, replacing context with the framework agnostic store, right, with the stand, which is something that we talked about. For
Justin.
yeah, I can't. I don't have it. I
I
don't
was
have it.
corrected today at work.
I don't think I have it
Zush,
in.
like Z as
Juice,
an S. So Zush stand. If there's any
juice
German
stand.
speakers out there, they're probably like shaking their heads at this incorrect lesson. But Sush, like the Z is like an S, and then the S is like a Z.
Juice stand.
That probably doesn't know. Yeah. Sush.
Juice.
Never mind. I, I, yeah, I had it earlier. Okay. um, yeah.
So I've
Anyways,
been.
but it doesn't matter. Yeah.
So
It's a
I
yeah.
so I picked that library because it just has a vanilla store that you can light up with state and actions, and then in anything that's React based, you can either use that vanilla store and the methods that come off of it for getting and setting and subscribing to state, or you can wrap it in the stand React hook, and it's just easier to access it. I don't know a whole lot about um, its use in Vue and Angular. Like there's not a lot of examples of people actually using it in Vue and Angular, but
Yeah.
I don't know why it couldn't work. Like it's meant to work. It
Right.
should work. It just someone needs to figure it out. I really couldn't find any good examples of it, but that's probably because just like in the React world, there's alternative state management libraries that are specific to those
Yeah.
frameworks, and no one's building anything that's meant to
Yeah.
work across these frameworks. So this could be one of like the first public projects that is actually doing that. So all that said, the way that I was thinking about it was there's a store package, graphical store that just gets exported. I think the most logical place for that to live is inside Toolkit, but it's a lot of code. Like it's a huge bit of code. It's the biggest, would be
Maybe
the biggest.
its own graphical store
So I
or
also
graphical. Yeah.
I had that's another way that I had it set up, but then yeah, it's just like it's another package. It seems like it would make sense to be inside the toolkit, but either way, it's decided to be
Either's fine to
it's
me. Yeah.
effectively the same thing.
Yeah,
Um,
the toolkit is the framework agnostic part for
right.
all intensive purposes, and we don't have to create separate module boundaries for front end packages that much because code splitting takes care of that these days. So breaking things into lots of little like for plugins it works great, but like yeah, I don't know. But yeah, well that's another question. Speaking
So
of plugins though, I
yeah,
think Justin, even just with our current wait, Zoosh stand, even with our current plugin implementation, would be super powerful. Not to mention other plugin APIs we plan to introduce, and here's how, right? Let's say you want to make, so have we made the classic Doc Explorer? Is that its own plugin yet, or no?
No, that's in graphical React. And so that was actually my first attempt, was to pull that out and just
Yeah,
build, because the way that,
you're on the right track. Because if we can make a plugin have its own state for something like a Doc Explorer, then not only, well, go ahead. You know where this is going. Yeah.
yeah. So that's okay. So the plan was get rid of context and just make a store. So step one was just like take all of the context state, all the values that you pass down through the layers, the React providers, and just move them into that store. That guy, I don't know the last time you looked at graphical React, but it is, because it's using context in a way that context really isn't meant to be used. The code is really, for me personally, it's very difficult to follow because of all the callbacks and the memos, and there's like synchronization utilities that are, it's really complex and complicated.
I know. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and
And
so
not like to fault, but it's just, it was the way to get it implemented
yeah,
with
yeah, no,
context.
it just,
And
yeah, it's great.
yeah.
It fucking works amazingly. It's just complicated code. It's like hard to just kind of grok what's going on. So it's layered in, it's just, there's a lot of layers and it's very complex. So simply like taking the context values, the state, and putting them into some kind of store was simple, but then you have all of the props that are coming in, and the way that those context layers are currently built, and the complexity is primarily because of all those props that are coming in. And some of those props are used across contexts, right? So like the execution context uses the fetcher that gets
This is
passed in.
inevitable because of the
Right.
architecture of the application, and it's thus why it's probably why this is probably why Apollo Studio or whatever it's called by now is not implemented with React context. And
Well,
no, yeah, it's just React context isn't really built maybe for this. And like I
it's
know we
not.
wanted to use something that was, it was my idea really to say we should use context, so here we are.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
it makes sense until you have to get other people involved, because the complexity just grows. Like you can't even, it's well commented. Thomas did a great job like putting notes all over the code. It's still very difficult to follow. So I I realized after just refactoring a lot of that code that I wasn't going to get it right. And that barrier was the props that come in, because you have to pick an entry point to set the initial state in the, sorry, the secondary state in the store, because with the stand, you just give it an initial state, right? So all the props that are currently coming in need to effectively be nullable, because a lot of those state values, you can't initially populate them. It's just impossible to do it without, because it relies on other props. So that was the barrier. It was really the props. And so what I was doing, and I have a branch that has all of it in it. It doesn't work really well. I mean, it doesn't have all of those prop values getting set correctly. Basically, in the graphical component, right, in the graphical package, in the graphical interface component is where I'm listening for, there's a use effect that listens for prop changes and then uses the set state value in the stand vanilla store to set all that up. The problem is that the problem that I ran into was again just related to the complexity in the context, and just trying to like build a mental model around how it was all working. So then I thought, you know what, let's do something else first, and let's take the history component and the classic Doc Explorer component and just pull them out as plugins, right? So graphical dash React, graphical dash plugin dash React dash Doc dash Explorer, right? Pull them out. And
Yeah,
that
that
way,
was the original vision, but yeah, we found it tricky to do with context. Yeah.
well,
And so I think it'll be easier to do without context. But and
so
there's
I,
strategies, like we ran into module boundary layer issues, right? Where it was like trying to it didn't, like, the context references didn't match up across plugin boundaries, but that's just because of how we wrote it, basically, I think.
It's layered in. So the graphical provider component has those context layers in it by default. Like, you can't choose to not have them, right? So they're effectively default plugins, so it makes sense that they're inside Graphical React because they're just default plugins. But pulling them out gives us an opportunity just to experiment with it being a totally separate thing. And that way you can also set it up so that, like, there's Graphical React, which would be just basically would just be like editor components, and then any of the Chrome that's wrapped around graphical, like the sidebar, icons, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it would just really be that core stuff that wasn't plugins. You know,
exactly.
Plugins, so when someone goes in,
and then we get the simplistic reference editor path, right, where there's no plugins. You know, if you want that, if you need that, then you get that lightweight option, right? Because if we make it totally pluggable, then there's like a toolbar free kind of low-fi simple, like, reference editor
and
type
that's how I built
too,
the prototype.
just from a plugin or a graphical config layer. Yeah.
Right. So the prototype sort of starts with an editor, with graphical editor, which is just the three or four editors, and that's it. And it's just a component that it just takes a schema and it runs away with it, and you can just run it by itself. That's why I built it that way, because it starts with that core, and then you can slowly build it up. You can build the UI pieces around it if you want to. But in graphical, so I started pulling the Doc Explorer out into its own plugin and using a Zastan store inside of that plugin, just so that it's self-contained and you don't have to think about it. You could just use it. And that's kind of where I stopped. Not stopped. That's where I'm at right now, is doing that. So I think what I'm going to do is unwind everything in that branch, right? And just because, remember, I have both everything pulled out into a store, and I have that Doc Explorer plugin as a separate package. I think I'm just going to unwind all that and just start with pulling out the Doc Explorer and pulling out history, just to, like, get a solid foundation, and then slowly attempt to move the rest of those context layers into another store.
Or like some, like, bits that compose the full store, however you look at it. But, like, yeah, what you're talking about is a great idea, and, like, and it will make React graphical so much leaner, right, and more focused, right, because the state will be maybe extracted out into toolkit, right, and then the logic, the business details of those plugins will be moved into a separate, plugin workspace, right? So then all of a sudden, graphical React becomes 50% simpler in its aims and its API surface. I mean, it will spread out to other parts of the repo, but it starts, it brings some, like, maybe, like, at least from a structure design standpoint, might improve just, like, understanding the code base, because that's something
I think
we want to help our users.
Readability is super important here. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
So let me jump in here a little bit. Okay, so
by the way, I had an idea originally, just wanted to throw this out with plugins, that we were going to have a separate, because you can configure multiple workspace routes. So I wanted to have a separate plugins workspace that would just be for graphical plugins, instead of packages. So there'd be, like, a whole, like, next to packages directory would be a plugins directory.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
I think
it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I actually had the repo configured for that 2 years ago. We briefly used it, but then we had to, yeah.
I mean, I would also say that, like, like you could really go down a rabbit hole with that, because it also makes sense to basically pull everything related to UI out into its own, and then where
Yeah.
you stop.
I have an issue related to this actually, where I proposed this, where we would basically, there would be like a language service, and then VS Code directory, and like basically, or just kind of like at yeah, like there'd be like a web directory, for example, or something. I don't know. There's all kinds of ways that we could reorganize it, but yeah, using the big packages directory is, I guess, the easy way to solve a hard problem for now. So like just put it all in one place. Everyone knows where to find it. Yeah. Because if we put in plugins, then people might not know where to look, because they're like, oh, it's a mono repo that has workspaces outside of just packages, right? If we have
Yeah,
packages, then people might think to only look there. So there's so many different,
yeah, it
making
probably. I mean, I
code
guess
navigable is hard.
it makes the most sense right now to just leave everything flat, because
Mm-hmm.
it's just what everyone's used to, and then slowly move it around.
Yeah, slowly.
Okay, so let me get situated here. Uh, I'll just show you the code. I don't need to show you the UI. Um, so there's a here. So here's right packages. Here's that store package. Here's the Doc Explorer package. Inside the store, it just exports um, graphical store,
Oh
right?
my gosh. This is so you. You're like, oh,
So
I've been working on this, and you have it just already in like.
well, it doesn't. It's not. It doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't work. That's the thing. Is like
Oh, okay, yeah.
it doesn't work. It doesn't work
But
because
it's
I
it's
haven't.
letting you think about schema and structure of the store, and logic and things, right? It's
Well,
helping you
I
think about it,
this
design it, so to speak.
this was helpful because it helped me understand the way that the context layers are built, right? Just pulling out these slices of state, right? These effectively
Yes.
match up directly to the context layers. But like I said,
Mm.
because a lot of the incoming props are shared between the context layers, it's not exactly one to one, and that's where I'm having difficulty is pulling all that apart. And again, like I said, I tried to do it all in one go, which was kind of dumb. I should have done it in smaller bits, but I really was just trying to understand what's going on with those context layers. So I think I have a good idea of how that's working, exactly how to get those props in, and how to it changes the way that the graphical component works, because that's where you have to
Mm.
do all the state setting, and that's where you have to run a bunch of user
Yeah.
right now. All that component does is like pull out the graphical React bits, and pass all those props through into the provider, and then the graphical React package is currently doing all of that work. If we're gonna do this, all of that state setting initially, all of the initialization code needs to move up into graphical, and that's a radical change. Like you
I
can.
have I have an idea for you. It is a
Okay.
big radical change, and yeah, but I think it's going to be an important change, because I think this will solve the plugin module boundary layer, right? So if we make it so that the store is instantiated by the users somehow, even programmatically, right? But it becomes an instance in their environment, in their bundler, and when in their code, they're
Yeah.
creating something that's like a store that they pass to a thing, or it's like they call them, like something happens where that store is instantiated, but it's instantiated by their implementation. So any graphical SDK or graphical React or graphical store implementation should be, like instantiating that store. And
Just
then
like.
maybe like we have to do something where we pass plugins to the store instantiation or
Yeah.
something, or like
Yeah.
there's like an internal detail we deal with in graphical, so you don't actually have to instantiate the store for graphical. But if
So
you're down at the SDK layer, you do instantiate it for yourself. Yeah.
so
And maybe
that's
that
the
solves that problem.
well that's the latter situation that you described there is what I was going for. I'm trying.
Yeah.
I'm not changing the API surface for graphical. I'm simply trying to swap out context for Zastan. That's it. I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not thinking about it.
Uh,
I'm not currently thinking about it as a major breaking change. Like I'm
Here's the
pretty
thing. It
sure.
doesn't have to be a breaking change to graphical. It can just be a change to the SDK, a breaking change to the SDK.
What
Okay.
do you mean?
So
What do
it's
you mean when
okay
you
to,
say SDK?
so if you're making a change to graphical React or graphical toolkit, that's a breaking change, that's fine. It doesn't mean graphical has a breaking change, right?
Um,
And it's 0x. Like no one's expecting, like people are probably hoping for it to break and evolve, you know? Like it'd be great if it works backwards compatible, but there's no reason that it has to. And if you need to break the API of graphical React
yeah,
to get where you want to go, that's totally fine. And graphical doesn't even need more than a patch version for that if it doesn't change how props are used,
yeah,
right?
yep, that's right. Okay, I get it. Yeah. Um, I'm just trying to think of
Yeah,
how
so
close.
it
I'm
could be
trying
a
to think
whole
of
new
how.
major version of graphical React and a
Yeah, I'm
patch version for graphical React, you know,
trying to think of how close.
or a
Give
patch
me.
version for GraphiQL. Yeah, package.
Trying to think of how close I think I can get to that. Um, let me show you. Let me show you graphical. At least.
Or maybe there's just like one minor breaking change, like maybe a minor change, like improvement, if anything, to the plugin API for sidebars or something. Like I still want to make the prop either go from plugin renamed from plugin to sidebar plugin, or plugins expands as gains a type parameter,
Yeah, there
uh,
would have to be some
so
sort
that
of
we could say,
namespace inside of
yeah,
plugin response.
like,
And I call it analyze. You know, there just definitely going to need to be some kind of a namespace there.
yeah, we'll get that though. We'll get there. Yeah, we can grow into that. That doesn't even require breaking change though. But if you have to break graphical SDK to do that, graphical React rather, then yeah, that should be fine. And the improvements will only help any nascent plugin maintainers out there, right? So it's like, well, yeah, it breaks the change, but now I can like add an entire like additional like state for my plugin, or I could even like interact with the state from Graphical Explorer Pathfinder plugin,
Yeah.
because the state is appended. You import your plugin after theirs, and now your state, you have their state available in your,
Well, it certainly
or
unlocks. It certainly unlocks a lot of possibility for people to actually use graphical as like a reference and to build new stuff. When I first got involved earlier this year in this, I thought like that's the way to go. People are gonna love it. The truth is, I don't think there's a lot of people building graphical GraphQL IDEs using graphical. I think they're just rolling it on their own, right? Like the more common
sometimes.
use case.
But the plugins are super valuable to framework maintainers who don't want to have to roll their own graphical. And I think
Yeah,
you'll
I
see.
think
Yeah.
that's the more common use case, right? Like that's really the power. It's not someone going on and building the next Insomnia or the next Altair or the next like anything
Yeah.
else. It's really
That's
just framework
those folks are people we want to empower, but they're like 5% or 2% of our users, right? The vast amount of our users want to enable a few plugins for their internal company graphical, and or they want to ship with their open source framework or their commercial framework version of graphical with these plugins, and they're fine using the theme. And like Gatsby, for example, is happy doing this. They haven't forked it. They're not at a lower level. They're happily consuming at the top graphical layer. There's another one that mentioned this too on Twitter. Other companies, I think Graph CMS is also using graphical too directly. So yeah, like we have Like, and we can continue improving on this, but we have gotten graphical to the point right now where it's sufficient for a custom product design on an
Yeah.
enterprise level. Like, we're there. We just can make it better, you know? And the plugins are part of that recipe. Yeah, some people are building entirely customized clients, but that's usually when they have like incredibly custom use cases. And you run across a lot, you're going to see so many of these use cases as people bring it up, as the editor evolves, as new things happen, people will keep having more and more new cool ideas, and they'll be outside of the scope of what we aim to do anytime soon. And that's what this stuff is here for. But you're going to get like a kind of anecdotal bias that this is that there's so many people with these extremely out there use case needs. But remember, 98% of them are happily using it right now.
Right.
The others are the ones that need to push it beyond, right? And that's where we help them with the SDK level stuff, like the graphical React and the store. We figure out how to improve that for them, right? But we're doing well at the graphical level and the plugin level.
I
We can
actually have
learn
a
what we can do
question.
more.
I have a question about
Yeah.
the inverse of that. And
Yeah.
by that I mean there's been a lot of props added to graphical over the last forever that
I'll admit I haven't used a good
the question
it's
is
not
like
consistent.
the question is
Yeah.
how do we trim a lot of the fat? And there's one example that that I had top of mind when I was working on this late last week. It was a prop. Let me see if I can find it here. It was a prop that
some of these props are
Lauren
there's like
from
no
the
convention to the naming really or anything. I apologize.
It was
It looks like
well,
a poorly maintained jQuery plugin interface.
I'm trying to figure out which one it was. It was one Lauren from the guild added it in earlier this year. I believe for when they launched Yoga 2. I think it was for that forked version of graphical that they initially included with Yoga 2, which they've since replaced with graphical 2.0. I don't remember which one it was, but I couldn't find any, like, it was so obviously just super helpful for that one use case, for that forked version, like for that thing, it was useful, but I couldn't find like anybody else using it. So the question is, like, there's an inverse thing happening here. Like, so my goal is going to be to just one for one replace context with this store. Don't change the API surface, but at some point,
which prop you said you couldn't find anyone using?
Let me see if I can find. I'm just going to go to.
Was it? Okay.
I'm just going to go to the issues and look for it, because I don't remember which one it was.
Yeah, no, we don't have to worry about it exactly right now. But yeah,
it's one of these.
We're talking on a high level architecturally. Yeah.
Yeah. So the goal is really just to just try to one for one replace it without changing that API surface. But at some point, we are going to need to clean that up. Like, we're going to need to change this, and that's when do we decide to do that? Like, it's certainly not necessary, but again, for readability, for discoverability, just for understanding the code base, anybody else that wants to get involved, it would be really nice to namespace a lot of these props, right? Like the context slices and the store state slices, like those are appropriately named. If we could do the same for these props, that would be great. Let me show you my thoughts on that that I started building in. So if you go to the store here, there it is, options. So there's the store has an options slice, and the options slice is effectively like a sidecar just for all the incoming props, so that when you need to, in the graphical component or anywhere that you need to set and get that state that's derived from the props, because it's different, right? Like there's in the context layer, there's context state that is derived from prop values, right? It's not a one-to-one. You know, sometimes it is, like the fetcher is one-to-one. Give me the fetcher, it's got to come in as a prop. I'm going to store it somewhere and I'm just going to use it when I need it. And if a new one comes in, I'm going to store that and I'm going to use that. There are other context values that are derived from incoming props. And that's why I've been thinking about this, like there's just an options, right? So that all of the props that come in are graphical options, right? It's namespaced as an option. It's sort of no longer a prop because we're outside of React in the store. In React, it's a prop. Outside of React, it's just an option. It's just an option for the state. So this is the direction that I'm heading, or this is sort of where I just kind of like ended up over the last couple of days. I've been doing other things for the last couple of days and haven't touched it. But the idea is just the store should be able to operate without the props, other than the fetcher. It needs the fetcher. We know that it needs the fetcher. And so the sidecar of options makes sense. I'm going to just keep going down this road, because otherwise, if you're looking at my screen now,
you want to know what I did once so real quick, going back to your store and where you're at, because right now you're just like composing these slices, right, in a kind of like a design level almost, right, where you're just kind of imagining the data design. So I did this similarly with Recoil, and something that was like one additional step that helped me so much, and it was years ago, and you know, I'm glad I like Recoil's great. I'm glad we're choosing this. Either way, I've made like a little sandbox for just the state implementation. And what I had it do is I had it just like read out the JSON stringified values of everything. There's probably like an inspector or something, but you could just like, it works without even React. So you could just like create a code sandbox with your state implementation and just start saying like abstractly doing the things you imagine it doing, and like thinking about the side effects. And I know it's like, maybe that won't be helpful for you, but it was helpful for me, where I could be like, here, I'm going to create just a simple little input and button and click this, and that's the query and the submit. But then here's the serialized JSON state as this is changing, like kind of building your own little kind of like Redux Explorer or Zustand Explorer. But you don't, I mean, if you don't need to do that, if you'd rather just put it into components.
I had a very similar thought, but I took a different tactic. And instead of building a sandbox where you could just sort of play with state with random UI components, because I really don't think that that's the issue. The issue is more in like the issue really is more integration, right? So it's more like, how does when you pass in an initial query, I don't really care that I know that it's going to end up in the state store. What I need to know is, does the doc explorer or do all the components, like, are they responding separately? So the tactic that I took, it's not in here, it's actually in a separate branch, was just to put Storybook back, or Ladle. I was using Ladle. I just put it back. That way you can break it down into you're basically doing integration testing at the store. It's complicated, and reintroducing Ladlebook or Storybook or Ladle or some other component development environment.
I'm excited about Ladlebook, your new project. I'm just saying.
Introducing any tool like that back into the repository sort of opens up a can of worms, because then you want to like add in
the story files. And
you want to
graphical.
you want to add in all the bits from graphical React, right? You want to begin to treat it more like it makes you want to treat graphical React more as like a traditional UI component library, which again was the original reason I got involved in this project, was to do that with the new design. But I don't think
And pulling state and maybe even some business logic out of there might allow you to do that in a way that where it could be like maybe graphical React and then some of like, or like graphical slash React dash components that graphical React implements, or it's tricky, but yeah, like
it's tough
thinking
to look
about
at,
it, like, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
it's tough to look at graphical React right now and think of it like a UI library because there's so much
Business logic.
There's so much in there, right? So
Yeah. Maybe it could contain a UI library and the hooks and business logic implementation for React, just like one would for Vue or something, where it takes the store and the toolkit and implements its own design library against those, right? So it's kind of doing these are compatibility libraries, like for, let's say, React, are dual purpose, right? They're a UI library and a business logic or like implementation of the state, right? So as much business logic as the store package can have, the better, right? Because then it can be shared by both. But at some point, we're going to have to say, well, now we have to implement this in a hook with a use effect thing, for React, and so that it can just be the glue code, right? Because ideally, as much business logic lives in something that's React agnostic, right? And then it will feel more like a design library.
Well, right? So I think this is, not when I say this, I mean, again, the one-to-one replacement of context with the store package. I haven't finished it, so I can't be totally sure. And I'm just now becoming more familiar with graphical React, but I can't be totally sure, but I'm pretty sure that that's correct, that it will remove all of the critical business logic. The only business logic that I can think of that would be left is all the code mirror stuff.
Yeah, we got to figure that out. Yeah.
Right.
Well, some of that's just going to be some of that's going to be just UI libraries specific. If we're using React, we're going to have to mount that in a way that's different. And maybe we get lucky and mount them in a platform agnostic way and share it. And actually, if you want to see a great example of that, Sandpack does that with CodeMirror 6, where they're just like, they have one core JavaScript library that's used by all the React libraries, or the React and Vue and other modes that takes care of like some of the core logic of mounting the components. At the end of the day, you're still going to have to do something with a ref or an actual ID or whatever the heck that the other phrase. I don't even know if anyone who does Vue or Svelte is watching. They're like, this is why Ricky said Svelte was working and it wasn't even working yet. Okay. But yeah, there's something really cool we can do here.
It's very, the editor implementations is far and above the absolute most complex bits that are inside.
Here's a way to think about this iteration. I know how you're thinking, like just replace context one-to-one, right? But what if your only goal in this is get graphical React to use a shared state and business logic without making any breaking changes to the graphical component, right? You can break changes to any other library you need to, even CodeMirror, GraphiQL, whatever, if we have to. But minor release or new major version because we have to make an API change or whatever. Or, maybe we we should be, on this, depends where there's a lot we can do without making breaking changes to graphical, but obviously we have to stay on CodeMirror 5 to not make breaking changes. But yes, yeah.
That's again, that's how I've been trying to think about it. Is graphical React would definitely change. Definitely. Graphical would not. Because all it is props. That's all it is. It's exactly the same. It wouldn't have an effect. Yep. That's what I'm going to continue to try to do.
Well, one thing to think about, the plugins at the graphical level do use the SDK, but again, plugin authors won't mind breaking changes in the SDK, you know, and there's already the past versions that can use if they don't have time to upgrade right away, right?
Those are the breaking changes to graphical React, is pulling out the plugins and trying to figure out, well, I guess, you know what?
Because maybe even at the hooks layer, it could look the same even after all, or mostly the same. Like there might not even be that many breaking changes. But maybe there will be. I don't want you to feel like you can't break changes. Yeah.
Well, I do want to make it palatable, right? Because this is just a proof of concept, right? I'm not proposing that this is something that we tackle right away, but it does help unlock. There's a lot of power in doing this. There's a lot of like freedom around the library. There's two issues that have come up the last couple of weeks. One is this, you know, Next.js dynamic import thing where code mirror is when you use the Explorer plugin and because you're feeding in the query and you're feeding in the on edit function, right? When it changes, code mirror is re-rendering. That's all related to context. If we didn't have
I was
context,
afraid of this.
Yeah, if we didn't have context in there, that wouldn't happen. But it's, I mean, again, it's like, it's very low priority, but that's one issue that I believe would be solved by removing context. And the other one is this person on Discord that is trying to build the diff editor thing.
Yes.
Where because of the I've got my own repository where I tried to do that, where
you went above and beyond, John.
Well, I just wanted,
like you didn't have to do that, but that's awesome.
I just wanted I wanted to see, because I believe the person's name is I'm not looking at Discord right now, RRVA. They shared some screenshots of like how it was rendering, and part of that,
they're a recurring user. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That thing where it's rendering in half, that's an easy fix. That's just like global CSS. The more difficult, that's why I asked if they're trying to render the diff editor inside of that dialog, because it's not the right place to do it. The right place to do it is to split the response view in half, right? You click a button that says,
I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's what I was saying, is that if we had a response plugin API where you could just say, this is the response viewer, right? And maybe replace the editor, or we have tabs for that,
Well, so I tried
what I wanted to do is like with like basically the query variables results, each can have tabs or drop down or something that are then able to have plugins as well, similar to how the sidebar works. So it would be like plugin type query editor, plugin type sidebar, plugin type results, and then you could configure which one is chosen by default.
So I was thinking about it at a lower level than that. So all I did was try to add in there's now two response editors, one on the left and one on the right, that just takes up the same amount of space that the other one did. But because there's context layers, you can't simply like render a new provider inside. You can't nest them like that, because it just uses the same context. It
gets messy.
If we weren't using context, we're using some other store, you could pull the store in and use React raw context to generate a new context just for like that new component, and access the store separately. So that you'd effectively have like two slices of the store running simultaneously.
Here's the thing, John. I'm glad that you're worrying so much about this really specific case, but we don't have to like figure out how to first class support like this 0.001% use case. But I'm so glad that you're thinking about it, because maybe we'll think of some cool ways to structure things to make this easier to do in the future.
Well, last week when that conversation was happening on Discord, it wouldn't have occurred to me to get involved if I wasn't already working on this store situation. So I mean,
but it got you thinking. Yeah, I know how that goes.
It was
Yeah.
top of mind.
Yeah, but think about some other ones. Think about look at some others out there. Like one thing I like to do sometimes, so let me double check. I think it was it's Gatsby and GraphCMS, whoever else is listening. I think GraphiQL for who else? I'm trying to see who else is using 2.0. Bruno. Yeah. Wait, no. That's someone just tweeting about something else. Gatsby, GraphBase. Yes, GraphBase is using it.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So if it's open source, check it out. Read Gatsby's and look at theirs. See how they're using it. Think about how you can make it easier.
I use GraphBase.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Their initial, they were using GraphiQL 1.0 when they launched, which was like early, maybe it was spring or early summer when they first went out. And their customization actually they weren't using 1x because it had tabs. I don't know what they were doing. They must have been using Playground initially. That might have been.
The 1x had tabs just before we got into the 2x work. Remember?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, maybe that's what they were doing. That would have been. Yeah, that would have been.
That was our little parting gift for 1x. It was to say here, just to buy us some time, here's tabs.
Yeah. Right. And their integration was pretty good. It felt like they had it customized, it sort of fit into their UI. It was a little wonky because the docs would slide out from the right, and that was a little bit weird because they had it embedded.
It's hard.
They had it embedded. And then then they upgraded to 2.0, and as far as I'm concerned, it's not as great of an experience because they're not currently leveraging. It just doesn't really fit inside of their UI because they were heavily customizing the last version, and with the new version, because it looks so much better by default, they're doing less customization. So I know that there are.
Keep in mind though, they might be not able to do as much customization right now for whatever reasons, and it just might be limitations for their purposes. But for example, at my company, we're already planning on our to write our own plugins, but it's internal, right? So keep in mind, a lot of people are using GraphiQL and you can't see it. And this is going to be the wonderful and sad part of being an open source maintainer of developer tooling is some of the coolest versions of what implementations out there.
You'll never know.
Maybe you can't see open source, but if you're out there and you have a really cool implementation, you want to show John and you're listening because you have ideas for how he can help improve it, or any of us can, let us know in the Discord. Follow us. No, follow my channel. Don't actually. It's not very. It's bad. It's a terrible playlist. Okay. Hit the subscribe button. That's what they say. Yeah, I don't. I'm too old to watch YouTube. No, I'm just joking. Anyways, there's a lot going on out there, and I would just assume plugins are being used more than you realize. Just look at the NPM stats on individual plugins, for example. That might tell you things well, let's look at NPM. Let's see if there's a GraphiQL plugin something. Maybe someone's already shipped an open source. Yep. Wait, that's a plugin for something that uses GraphiQL. This is a lot. There's frameworks that have a plugin for GraphiQL, so this search query is confusing. Plugin for the GraphiQL IDE that displays GraphiQL. Oh no, that's old. No, maybe it has to be recent too. We'll get to it in a bit. GraphiQL plugin Explorer. Speaking of, we need to fix that. I plan on adding a GraphQL or GraphiQL NPM bot user, so it doesn't look like everything is being published by me anymore. Just so, yeah. let's see, Backstage has a graphical plugin. Thank you. Yeah, let's see, run through. Yeah, don't know if we have GraphiQL plugin. Happy plugin. Yeah, sorry, wasting time on the call here. I apologize.
No, now I'm looking
yeah.
now I'm looking at it too. It is interesting. There's some like big companies that are building stuff. IBM has a plugin for previous versions of graphical.
Yeah,
That's
it's
interesting.
amazing. You can go search any of the package repositories for graphical for any language, any package manager, and you will find something. Whether it's PyPy, whether it's Cargo, whether it's Ruby Gems, everyone's got graphical going on. It's cool, and you can just there's just a whole universe. And across other languages, you'll sometimes see the non-JSX version, which teaches you a little bit about like how to support advanced implementations outside of that, which help people because it's not fun running a Webpack bundler that's orchestrated by another language. I think Ruby on Rails added and removed that just as an example. So that means that the people who maintain the graphical plugins for various Ruby on Rails related framework or libraries had to go from the JSX version and being able to use the NPM package to back to the CDN version and using React Create element. So I think, or maybe I could be wrong there, but either way, it's just interesting. They all have all these other constraints we don't often think of in the JavaScript world, but you'll see some really interesting implementations out in the wild there too. You could check. I can't remember what Golang's repository is called. Java. Of course, obviously in your neck of the woods, Composer, whatever packagist repo. See if I can remember the names of the package managers and repositories for all the major languages. But yeah, it's out there. There's a lot of it's still 1.0 implementations, but yeah, if anyone's out there has a cool 2.0 implementation that's open source in the wild, especially useful for us, please share it with us. Like,
Yeah,
we'd love to see
nice.
it. We'd love to help you improve it.
Yeah, it would be nice to get some. It would be nice to take direction, right, from the community rather than just trying to cook this up all on our own. It feels like we're going to miss something. Like it feels like, especially
maybe we need a big feedback discussion ticket. Just be like, here, just dump all your feedback from 2.0 from custom implementations here. And if it's like a big enough issue, we'll create new issues or bugs from it, because you can do that. You can take a discussion response and then convert it to an issue.
Yeah, example. I think that's a great idea. Pinning a 2.0 feedback discussion in the repo is a great idea. I still haven't received any feedback on the discussion I started about the visual operation builder, which it would be nice to hear what folks think about that. I just, I think the truth is, like, as sort of wonky as the OneGraph Explorer plugin is, like, it works. Like it's fine. It works, it works. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of currently a lot of drive to, doing the Pathfinder thing, which is, something which was in the original 2.0 design proposal, or is also very similar to something that to what Apollo is doing, right? That I don't even know directionally if that's
it's a good question.
There are a lot of people working here on this, and so
I think Pathfinder is important, but I think we can cover a lot of it with the Explorer plugin, like you're saying. And here's what I think we should do. We should consider doing. I think we could do a 2.1 where we enable Explorer by default, and then show people how to instantiate a more lean one. And this is maybe for Zustan, because then we can say, okay, now you can have only Explorer and like and not query history if you want, right? If you like, so we kind of say here, now you have more options, and you can actually disable these things as plugins now because we have a new state implementation. It's more stable, and because the state implementation is better, and you get what was I talking? Oh my god, what was I talking about?
I think that, Ricky, I think we could do the select your default plugins thing, right? We could do that right now. Like we could add another prop to
What I'm saying is to make it on by default, because the thing is a lot of people keep saying, where's the Explorer? Where's the Explorer? If we just make it be enabled on by default, I bet you almost no one will complain like that it's on by default. And if we, especially if we document how to like enable GraphiQL with only the plugins you want to override that behavior, for example, right? But we can just say Explorer, Doc Explorer, and like everything's like even Code Explorer, right? We can just say all those. I mean, Code Explorer, I'd like to, but it's a little bit language specific, but I'd like to. I don't know. If we had a way for people to extend Code Exporter to like export a Python script or something if they want, just by using a template thing, that would be sweet. But yeah, like let's get there somehow. I don't know. Either way, like, yeah, I'm just thinking that there could be a breaking change where the default plugin composition, when you just enable GraphiQL, you don't specify any plugins, that like, yeah, then we wouldn't have to go through the step of telling people this is how you enable GraphiQL Explorer. Because no matter how much we say, like here in the docs or even if we had a doc website, like here's how you enable GraphiQL Explorer, people aren't even going to look at that. They're just going to look at GraphiQL 2 and be like, oh, this is cool, no Explorer yet. And they don't realize that they're just a few steps away from enabling it. So if you make it enabled by default, it could just be like, hey, this works in GraphiQL now. That's how most people would see it, even though they don't realize it's right, like not far away. You know what I mean? It's tricky though, because then it's gonna, it's gonna add additional code and a little like runtime complexity by default to all implementations, but we could just try it. And if it's a huge issue and people are like, oh my God, this breaks everything, and it like we have like 4 bugs related to it, then maybe we should reconsider it. But I think it would be fine to enable Explorer by default. I'm making my RFC right now. That's my verbal RFC.
I'm trying to think how that works. I mean, that's a very simple change to make.
But it's a big change on a user and like on every other level than technological,
Wouldn't it be, I see what you're saying by making it default, but let's say we did that. Wouldn't a very strong equivalent be just changing adding a prop to GraphiQL that allows you to select, just it's a Boolean history, true or false, Doc Explorer, true or false, one GraphiQL.
The problem with that is then that is competing with the plugins array, right? Especially if we want to make all of those plugins potentially, right? Then yeah, which is the source of truth?
They should all be plugins. Those are like
yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It's right. But then like what's the default when there's no plugin prop specified, right? So if you want to disable or enable something, we can make it so that when you add plugins, it disables everything else and only enables the plugins you provide. But then we have our happy path set of defaults for all users, right?
Yeah, I think you're right in that. I mean, we all kind of know this already, that the vast majority of these installs, if they're aware of the Explorer plugin, they're using it.
For a lot of installs, the more the better. Like I've even had people tell me, don't worry about bundle size. This is for developers, like if it's a big fat load initially and we get everything we need and it's all these bells and whistles, that's all we want. Like, it's like the
It's
Doc
hard.
Explorer case. We just build a custom set of components to help with lightweight doc site examples but we'll hear those complaints if they arise, right? Maybe it's already pretty lightweight. Maybe
It's
they
hard
can
to
just use React Lazy and it's no big deal, right?
I mean, it's hard to argue with it's a developer tool. Like bundle size is kind of like not the most important thing in the world.
It probably matters to maybe like less than 10% of our users, somewhere in there, right? Because they're doing something that's public. Maybe it's customer facing. They want the first load to be snappy because their competitors' first load is snappy. But you're only going to remember the first load the first time. All that shit's going to be cached in your browser, and you're not going to see a heavy load very often. And plus, I wouldn't be surprised if there's user research that shows like a cool little like loading screen gives people like an impression this is a more serious developer tool or something.
I think
Like
that's what
I bet there's
Delayed is doing. Delayed, they have like their implementation is really great. It may be different, but initially, like it would sort of like pop up from the bottom of the screen, and it was sort of this like modal / dialogue / takeover thing, and so the loading was sort of obfuscated by that initial transition into like it displaying. It was really cool, and probably just as effective at disguising the fact that that this was a whole different set of code that was loading up. So yeah. You're muted.
like, especially when we get into Monaco, they'll definitely need to do this. Like, no offense to Monaco editor, but it's there's a price for all the bells and whistles it comes with, right? But it like, they need to be able to be loaded as lazy components, code split, even from the route chunk, right? Because you don't want to block the initial render of a whole developer tool page for your. I guess I'm thinking an SSR. Oh, sorry, I forget a lot of most developers don't have to deal with server render, but yeah, it's.
I mean, there might be a lot of, Next is not an unpopular tool. There might be a lot more of that going on that we don't know about.
Right.
But
and we need to give them a nice client render path. Maybe we could even have a special export of graphical component that's like graphical / next in the graphical repository. And so you'd import a graphical component called graphical next that just wraps it in like a React lazy loader that is somehow protects for this.
I think that
or graphical / server or something. Sorry.
Well, there's an issue right now that came up, I think, last week, where somebody was having this this cursor jumping thing, right? In Next, when you're dynamically importing and you're using the Explorer, we talked about this, right? The simple, we already have a fix in another issue that's published, right? You just see if it's rendering on the client or not, and you don't use the component. So the issue that we're talking about here is actually related to Explorer, the OneGraph Explorer plugin, and that refreshing or re-rendering internally because of context. But in the larger picture of using graphical in Next.js, there's already a fix. Like, it's a fine fix. You just don't render it if you're on the server, right? I don't see any other reason to make a change to accommodate for that. But this issue though with the cursor changing is related to context.
Yeah, in context.
Not related to Next.js. Not really related.
Okay.
To Next.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. Well, yeah, I agree. I think we could do this all at once. Like, we would make everything in the sidebar plugin, implement Zustand, make whatever breaking changes beneath graphical we need to make, and then do a minor version to graphical and say now Graphical Explorer is enabled by default. But if you provide plugins, breaking change, you override everything. So if you're providing just the Explorer plugin, then suddenly Schema Explorer and everything's going to be gone. You'll notice, and you're going to go check the docs once you make that upgrade. You know, because a lot of people will make a minor version upgrade without checking, and yeah, so maybe I don't know, maybe even it's a major version. I don't know, whatever. You know, there's a lot of.
I think let me get the history and the classic Doc Explorer. Let me get them pulled out into separate plugin packages with their own just saying stores, removing context from the equation, and then I'll PR that, and everybody can have a look, and it'll be a do not merge, and then slowly start plugging away again on like removing individual context layers. Because like I said, I just did it all kind of whole hog, and it got kind of messy.
It gets exciting though when you have like a schema you get to define, and you want to just do everything. You want to link it all together, you know. So yeah, go for it. But yeah, you also need to make it practical. Yeah, I know that.
It is exciting. It's also just about other people who, I don't know how many other people are following along with this. I don't know how many other people care about doing this with graphical, like who knows. But it is important, I think, for the future of graphical to have this store separation and to kind of get out of the context world. So if there's anybody following along, doing it in easily explainable chunks, it's probably it's just a lot more palatable. So my initial approach was just to like shotgun it, and I'll wind that back. And I should have code in, I don't know, probably tomorrow, because it's not that difficult to extract the history plugin. Well, it does rely on storage. Oh shit.
Oh, right. Then this is another thing. Harut Kumar was working on this. The idea is we would move the storage API to Toolkit.
It's already there.
That solves that. Oh, it is. Okay, we did that already. Cool. Yeah.
The storage context layer that's in graphical React just uses the API from Toolkit.
Okay, cool. But we need to be able to extend the storage API, right? Or we just need to use additional. There's no reason why a plugin can just say, here's an additional storage key, right? But we need to give it a hook to use, right?
That's what the storage context layer provides. It has those methods for doing that,
so
which is why it was
there's hooks from graphical React that you can use to actually store your own state keys in your plugin. There you go.
Actually, I don't know if you could do. Let me look.
Well, that's what we need to do. We need it. Yeah. But isn't this great? It really helps you push the plugin APIs as far as you need to accomplish these things. So every challenge is a benefit to use it.
So that ability to set your own key, that's in the storage API from Toolkit. And so
so you don't even need the hooks for that. You could provide hooks as an abstraction for it if you wanted, but yeah.
I think now that I'm looking at it again, I think the reason that there's a context layer for storage is because you can pass in your own
storage. Yes. Is the storage have async methods yet? That was the breaking change that we had hoped to make, because they were sync methods, but we wanted to make them async so that you could use network storage or local forage or indexed DB. I got it right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking at.
I kept calling it InnoDB for a while. Yeah.
I'm looking at the class now. It's all sync.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a change that we wanted to make. Harith was going to work on this as part of making it part of Toolkit, was to make all the methods async so that you could say use local forage or IndexedDB or IDB library IDB key val, I think, would even work. That could be our default if we wanted to switch to IndexedDB from local storage, which might make things faster.
Yeah,
But
that for a while.
and then also IndexedDB, then we can share state with web workers for, I don't know what, maybe something called Monaco. You know, and then we don't have to spit the GraphQL schema and language service results over the boundary, the main to worker boundary layer anymore, because then they can just both write and read from the IndexedDB state. That's the change that me and Christine wanted to make. So just a thing to think about when you're thinking about the persistence. If the faster we jump to IndexedDB, the better. But we don't have to do that now. We can keep it.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
just I don't want to. This doesn't need to get drug out, but there's a middleware for Zastand that's called persist that just basically does all of
does this.
All of it.
What we wanted to do was make the storage API be compatible with Redux persist style APIs, which that one's probably compatible, where you could just take any Redux persist plugin and use it, right? It's like a spec kind of almost. Because like Redux persist sets an API. Is it like that? Because I know it was like that for a couple where there's just like any state library dash persist libraries, we're all reusing that. But it's not a big deal if it's not exactly that. If we have a different standard to follow, a spec to follow,
well,
fine.
So note that this middleware does support both sync storages and async storages, but an async storage does come with a cost. This is from the Zastand persist middleware.
Zustan, or Zastan, whatever. Sorry, don't even worry about that. Yeah, I'll look it up for next time. Okay.
I'm going to disregard, but it's just because of hydrating the store initially. Looks like.
Again, hydrating the initial store isn't as much of a big issue for us. Yeah, we don't have to make.
Well, it is because of the number of touches across graphical React for the storage context layer is high. There is a lot of there's a lot of usage there. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna pretend like I'm not gonna make it. I'm not gonna make any changes here. I'm just gonna pull this out into a storage slice and treat it like the rest of the context slices without making any changes to it. Just to see. I honestly, at this point, I'm not even sure that. I'm not positive that this single store idea is like simple to do, because I don't understand the initialization of all the slices with the props and everything, and like timing all inside the graphical component. So I'm just going to I'm just going to one for one it and just just to see, like it may not even be worth working on, but I mean it may not be worth seeing through to the end. I mean, I need to get to the point where I can be.
I think it can be. Let me know. Just know that if you run into package boundary issues, try instantiating the store in the graphical workspace and not in graphical React. I promise you, if you run into issues, that will solve.
Oh no, that's how it is, because of the way that
that's how it is. Okay.
The first time you access the store out of the package is when it gets lit up, and the graphical component uses the store to set the initial state based on the props that are coming in.
Beautiful. Okay, great. Yeah.
So I'll have some of this in probably by tomorrow. By the end of the week, I'll probably have this in, and we can begin to slowly have conversations about like its viability. But this direction has been great.
For adding slices, real quick, add them to the plugin array instead of using a hook to add or retrieve the slice. Does that make sense? So when you're defining your plugins in the array, right? And you have this little JSON object for each plugin, right? we add a new key for like store or state or something, and there you can pass your slices alongside the component. Do you see what I mean?
No, I don't understand. Try again. I want to understand.
I think this will help. Let me look at how our current. I'd have I have to look at how graphical works first because it keeps changing. But I'm pretty sure the plugin prop. So so this is in graphical React now. Plugin. So when we're parsing a plugin, we have content, icon, and title, right? Content is a component. Icon, it can also be a component, and title is a string. What if we also had something here that was like store or state, or even to be super descriptive, slices? And slices could be the array of slices that need to be passed to that. So your plugin would export like maybe just a thing called slices that you like you'd have like explorer slices and whatever.
I don't
It's
think
annoying.
I don't think it would need to, because the way that I'm thinking, let's take the classic Doc Explorer.
Do you think you could use hooks to instantiate slices?
Because
to append slices to the store?
so
Yeah.
because React plugin React Doc Explorer is a React plugin, you can export a hook just like what happens now. Right now, it's inside of graphical React, but Explorer effectively exports two things. One is the component. The second is use Explorer context, right? So that you can access those values, so that you can, excuse me, so that you can click inside of CodeMirror and it'll make changes. That surface does not need to change. The package graphical dash plugin dash react dash doc dash explorer can export two things. It can export the component itself, the React component, and it can access a React hook. That React hook would be backed by its own Zastan store instead of context.
So okay, so exactly inside the component that's passed as the content value, right? That would be inside there. You would just use a hook to register your slices, like register slice or register.
Yeah, the Doc Explorer state
that makes
machine.
sense.
The Doc Explorer state machine is simple enough. All that is doing is if not all it's doing, most of what it's doing is just keeping an array of it's the nav stack. Like it's a field.
The nav stack. That is a state machine implementation, wasn't it? Okay. Or you kind of okay.
I'm just using it as like a generic term, like the context values, the setters and getters. It's really just focused around that. Right. So there's no slices. There's no, like, there's really no need to mush that up. That's actually, since I've tried to do the Doc Explorer already, I'll tell you the bit that was the most troublesome. It was not the state. It was not the hook for the state. It was all the tests, because the way that the tests are written for the Doc Explorer inside of graphical React, it's all
it all depends on the full Chrome. Concept. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I have an idea for you. Yeah. Well, so you can move these tests out. You test it at a lower level where it like mounts the component inside something that's maybe like a test, like basically like this is where I feel like plugins are more and more need to have their own like little CLI, like our own create graphical plugin or something. What would that be? CGP. So if you use CGP test would give you like, would allow you to like have like test utilities or something maybe, or allow you to like kind of like run unit tests in a way that they're like, they assume like the frame, like a, like not actual graphical, but like a skeleton maybe, or just better unit tests, like the tests more at the unit level. Because I bet you could like just write a unit level test for the content component so to speak, and write unit tests even for smaller components within the plugin, right? So like,
Well,
because a lot of this stuff that we're testing, it's like an integration test, right? They like unit,
exactly what it is.
but like graphical.spec.tsx is definitely like a giant integration test surface. So yeah, maybe it needs to be broken up into more files so it can be run concurrently, but that's just me thinking in a
Well,
CI optimization.
one thing that's again, there's a really simple one-to-one way to replace like all those context layer tests with these store-based tests. In fact, it's actually easier to do it with the store setters and getters, because you can set up before each's and before alls.
I keep forgetting the tests have been rewritten for context too. So like I was just speaking of it and wow, okay.
Yeah, but
Oh
so
my gosh, y'all.
the test, because they were rewritten for context, they're effectively all integration tests. Like that's
Thomas,
what they are.
thank you for both all
Totally.
of you, the work you did with that. Yeah.
And it actually makes it, there's already like typed fixtures that are there.
Mhm.
So it's the testing is the reason I said I was like, it was the most difficult part was not because I can't figure it out. It's just because it's very time consuming to go in and replace all of that. But it's all there. It's just, I just need to like get in and do it. So the Doc Explorer and the history, pulling them out as plugins should be relatively painless. I've got most of that work already complete. One thing that I am thinking about as a part of that work is, again, I don't know the full React, graphical React code base. I know that there's tests inside of it. And so I just need to make sure that when I pull out the Explorer and the history from graphical React into separate packages, that all of those tests that might be spread that are using that somewhere, because again, it's all layered context. It's in there somewhere. I just need to make sure that I'm covering all those bases. But I just need to. I need to just
know. One of the advantages of having a mono repo here is that you can actually use integration tests to provide unit test level like coverage, in the sense that even in a coverage report it would work. So for example, we do this with GraphiQL language service. So a lot of the tests, so if you look, the underlying GraphiQL language service doesn't even have that many of its own tests. Most of it is tested by our implementation, like our integration tests. And so if you look at like the coverage is wonderful, but if you run it just the test for just GraphiQL language service, the coverage is like 30%. Do you see what I mean? So like GraphiQL language service.
I'm looking now,
yeah, it has some great tests, but it doesn't cover a lot. But it's really at the language service server level and at like CodeMirror and GraphiQL that we're actually testing this. Isn't that cool? So that it has good coverage when you consider the integration coverage.
Well, and I think that's any of these plugins. The majority of the code to test the plugin is going to be integration, because this is, other than that, like Doc Explorer is just UI. Like it's the only unit test that you need to do is when I click a button that tells it to cycle through the stack, does it cycle through the stack? When I click a button to remove something from the stack, does it remove? Like it's relatively, these unit tests aren't even probably necessary, because it's hard to break that. But
so here's a way, a test-driven way that you could do this refactor, right? Is that you move it to a plugin, and then you can still run those integration level graphical spec.tsx tests against it, right? Then you don't even have to move the tests or rewrite that part of the test, because those tests are already testing what you're going to be doing. They just test it from graphical workspace.
They all use context. That's the thing, is they're all using that layered context. So at some point, and again, like I said, it's relatively
the test
simple.
Would be importing the context, and I see. Yeah, so then it's funky, because then all the tests for your context are actually like being pulled, like done literally in that test. And then it makes sense for that to be in the plugin.
It's the
kind of.
reason that the shotgun approach to replacing context with this new store package wasn't a good idea, because I had to leave all the context code in because the tests were relying on it, because I was trying to do too much at one time, right? This is a lot easier, and that I can begin by starting with these two plugins and pulling them out, can begin to actually remove the code, the context layer, and like actually replace it, rather than just having like this other store that the component is using and the tests are using the context. So this has been very, very helpful. I'm famously known for getting wildly out of control when like refactoring code like this, because TypeScript makes it really simple to do. So this directionally has just been fantastic.
Yay! Great. Yeah. Remember, it's just minimal breakages to the graphical workspace, but break any other APIs you need. Let's get there, because any other user that's watching this will say the same thing. Like, yeah, we're not worried about the plugin API, the graphical React or toolkit APIs having breaking changes right now, because whatever's on the other side is gonna help all of us, and it's 0xy, so it's it's expected. You could do breaking changes as minor versions of the 0x versions until you're ready to call it stable as 1. That's a rule that's in the Semver spec. Not everyone knows about it, but it's something to keep in mind. I don't know, have we already gone to a 1x version for graphical React? I can't remember.
No, I think it's still at 0.013.
See, then you have infinite breaking capability within the minor versions until you're ready to call it 1. It could be 2 years till it's 1.0. Who cares? Just keep breaking it till you can give the 90% of our users the experience they want. Because
that's really helpful. That's all really helpful.
Yeah.
So the only other thing that I had to talk about today was I was hoping that Tim Hall from Postman was going to be on the call, because last month he bravely took on the task of attempting to replace CodeMirror with Monaco in graphical React. Bravely, I say that because I tried it and I couldn't figure it out. Part of it was because of the layering and the context and just all the complexity there. It's also just it's a big job. It's a lot of changes that are so core to the experience, namely like the integration with the Doc Explorer and CodeMirror. That we don't have like Monaco specific. There aren't designs.
This is why
for how that works.
That's why I felt like it was. I regret saying that we can do one or the other, because it was easier to do Monaco at the same time as context for us, at least. Like from the much simpler original graphical 1 components to just switch those to add Monaco, and we did TypeScript. Then we added we converted the components to TypeScript, released that, and then we converted them to Monaco, and then because they're all just plain JavaScript in 2020. Still.
Which one got converted to Monaco? What do you mean by that?
Oh, when I'm saying like when we did that context RFC. So in like late or early 2020, that's when React.
Did that use Monaco?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but it was an older version of it. But yeah, it shows you how we did it with context and everything. So it's like there's like an editor context that manages your Monaco editor instances, but there's a lot of flaws with it. So and that's where we got the feedback.
I tried to find that code and I can't.
Yes, Thomas introduced a PR to remove it. We can reintroduce it, I guess. We could undo it. Remove RFC example. Yeah.
No, I was just curious.
It was in example.
I can't even.
Is it not in examples anymore? Yeah, I think we deleted it from examples for some reason.
Yeah. That's where
it seemed like a good idea at the time, but maybe we should reintroduce it for that. I think he said.
No, I'm sure it's on one of these older branches. It'd be easy enough to just go get it from there. I don't know that it needs to live in the repository. I was just curious because when I was early last week, when I started this replacing the context thing. I wanted to reference that code because I was curious if when Thomas was doing the conversion, if he added optimizations, if he had added a bunch of rendering optimizations, or if they were already there. I was curious because it seems like it's just for me, it seems like it's over optimized, like it's optimized early, but that's because I don't know what I needed to see what the original code was. I wanted to run it and see if it was like indeed.
The original code was, yeah, it was like thrashing context state everywhere. If you watched with like the React inspector with highlighting on update, it was like, you know, it's why it's part of the reason I kind of like, and just as that was happening, it was like, oh, so this is like going to be an actual pandemic and we have to shelter in place. It was all at the same time. So I was like, I give up. I'll come back to this. And then we found some easier wins for the community and for what I was working on at the time. But it was like, yeah. But yeah, we can, yeah, I just linked you to the PR where we removed it. So if you want, we can revert it and re-add it to examples.
No.
Or you can just use it for reference.
I can find it in an old branch. There's no need to reintroduce it.
Oh yeah, off that PR you should be able to. Yeah. Like whatever was the last tag before that or whatever. So let's see.
Oh yeah, this is fine. Yeah. So why can't I find this before?
Yeah. I had to search in pull requests with is open like filter remove. So maybe
I don't know why I had so much trouble.
I just searched RFC. Yeah, but either way, yeah.
This brings up another thing, and maybe this, since we're getting kind of late, we're getting kind of long here. Maybe this can be the last thing that we talk about, and that's just cleaning up old stuff, right? In the issues, particularly.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Because there's still pruning that can be done. I'm happy to go through and do it. Yeah. I just don't want to.
I've been meaning to do that. I have some other projects that side projects outside of work I'm wrapping up right now. So I'm going to be jumping in a little bit more, and also there's the GraphiQL Foundation grants we might that we're both applying for, and so that can help us too. But either way, soon I can just jump in and start doing more of that. I'm trying to just like do a little bit here and there, at least have some comments to help move things along. But I can like start setting like a weekly limit. Like I should be able to close 10 issues a week. There's no reason I can't. I have so much context.
Yeah, I mean, there are, I'm sure, dozens, if not many dozens of these issues that can just be closed. I mean, there's one from.
This is also why I want to use the roadmap issue, because then we can say this is a great feature request. Let's link it in the roadmap and close it. And then.
Well, I think there's been so much confusion around like what like, are we looking at an issue or a discussion that's a roadmap, or is there a real roadmap? Are we using projects? Like
there was a GitHub issue for it. Yeah, we need to figure out. We need to consolidate.
We just need one roadmap, and it needs to get put back into place. And I think that.
And the guild is a big fan of projects, and it works well for them. What do you think? We could use GitHub projects. We could use GitHub projects beta. We can use just a roadmap issue. I'm fine with any of those, but it could allow us to.
There's so many, and I'm the new kid on the block, so I don't have a lot of like the context from this. But for me personally, from what I've learned in the last like 9 months, there's a lot of people that are very passionate about graphical, but they come and they go. They pop in and they pop out as time allows. And some of them are maintainers, and most of them are not maintainers. They're just people coming and going with important critical opinions that we need to pay attention to. But when we use issues and discussions for decision making and sourcing feedback that is going to contribute to a roadmap, it seems like everybody is able to, people contribute like their initial thoughts and their opinions, but because they're popping in and out, it's less of a discussion and more of just kind of like somebody trying to put a pin in something without actually putting a pin in something. So
Yeah,
I think the structure
it's like a suggestion box.
yeah. So I think the projects is great. It gives a lot of structure. But we'll need to kind of redo it, right? Reset the baseline and then ensure that everybody knows that like that's the place where roadmap stuff is happening. And I'm guilty of doing
Yeah.
roadmap stuff
Me
in
too.
discussions and issues as well. It's just kind of,
Yeah.
it's just the way that we work. But I think projects is fine if it's endorsed by enough people. There's no reason why we
The one thing is like I think Tomas felt it was unnecessary and we could just use GitHub issues. So we should put it to like a discussion for all the maintainers to decide what works best for us. Another plus for GitHub projects is you can set up a really nice automated bug triage system with GitHub projects. And you get like a nice little dashboard where you can explore all the bugs and whether they're confirmed or not, like a little, not even a dashboard, like a Kanban style board almost. At least that's how GitHub Projects Original works. And then GitHub Projects Beta is more like Jira-like, but is also kind of neat. I think, in fact, I think the guild said that they prefer GitHub Projects and not Projects Beta, which is interesting. That's why I think they still have both enabled, because I think there's camps. But I like both. I'd be fine with either. I'd be fine with roadmap issues, but just consolidating around one for all front end, or just all graphical and then like cross-link to one for Monaco or something. But like roadmap issues with our mono repo is really tricky to wrap your head around, or any just project management, because it's like there's so many threads. There's like it's essentially one mono repo with like 24 different products in it, if you think of it from a technical product management standpoint. So if there's any TPMs out there that want to help, if there's any like that want to help us and folks from Stellate and everyone else trying to wrap their head around that, if anyone's just like, I'm the best TPM for this job, and you are willing to work for volunteer or grant money, come join us. Yeah.
This would be wonderful. Well, so I suppose we could table that for now, but I do think I was just gonna, as I've been digging into this situation with context, as I've been spending more time on the actual graphical repository, not in my own like prototype future world space, as I've been getting more involved, I've had to spend a lot more time searching and finding and looking inside of the issues in the discussions. And I just noticed that there's a lot of stuff that just needs to get closed. Like it's ready to, it's done. It just never got closed.
You're right. It's done. So much of it is stuff that's because 2.0 is happening. We have these basic plugins. We can already just say, this is done. This feature request is supported. This bug has been fixed since 2018. So yeah, there's no reason I can't do at least 10 a day, or 10 a week rather, with my schedule, and maybe just put like a kind of a reminder for that. Maybe we could, I know Tomas had this great idea of doing just like a graphical triage he had scheduled, and we were supposed to like go through together and squash bugs. And I feel terrible I didn't help with that, because I probably would have been able to help so much with that. And
when was that?
It was a while ago. The idea is he wanted to do it weekly to just kind of clear things out, and it was him and oh my gosh, our other colleague from Stellate.
Tim.
Tim, of course, yeah, Tim, yeah. So we could pick that back up again, or we could just do it async, or just do it in chat, where we just kind of had like, hey, vaguely like Thursday nights or something, we all try to show up and squash some bugs together or something in Discord or something. We just pick a night, or yeah. Yeah, something. And then that way you can know that I'll be around to answer some questions right away or whatnot. Because it's just the long tail. It's just like some of these bugs take a while because it's like, well, you have to make sure like the right maintainer has to pop in to answer. Like maybe I'm not the one to answer, or maybe I am. And like the answer you have is kind of like a guess, and mine's the more accurate one. But then there's plenty of issues where I'll be guessing now, especially with GraphiQL 2, and you have the correct answer. So it's like we've become very specialized in our maintainer abilities, and I think we could cross-pollinate a little to help because
But
I'd love to learn.
I mean, I like the async idea.
Yeah. Okay.
Would it be helpful for so I'm just fearful of like going through and closing stuff that I think is closed, but actually like might not really be like looks closed, but not closed. Would it be helpful to like go through like pages at a time and just grab like issue numbers and paste them into Discord and say, hey, I think that these are ready to be closed. Does anybody want to look at them and tell me that that's not true? And then give it like 48 hours or 72 hours.
I'm remembering something someone did for us that was super helpful with playground ones, and we cleared a bunch of bugs right away. We made a freaking spreadsheet with like statuses for. But you know what? GitHub Projects Beta is basically that if we were to use it that way. Yeah, but if it's still like, if you'd still rather would just use a good old Google Sheet or whatever, we have a Google Drive, so go at it, whatever you prefer. Or maybe you want to use Airtable. I don't care. Yeah.
I think
something.
I think
or Notion or whatever.
The reason, Ricky, that projects might be a little I think the reason why people might be apprehensive about it is because there's a lot of stuff there already that is like.
What is it? Yeah, we need to clean it up. Yeah,
that's what I mean. It's intimidating. I'm looking at it right now.
Are you looking at GitHub Projects Beta or the old
beta.
GitHub Projects?
I'm looking at beta.
Yeah.
So there's a GraphiQL 2 tab. There's a Monaco GraphQL tab. There's a GraphiQL tool. There's like.
They're all just different filters of the same data. So some of them have the same, but yeah.
I know what they are.
Consolidate.
It's intimidating because it's just a lot. Like
when we don't need a separate GraphiQL 2 tab anymore, because guess what? It's launched.
It is.
So it's all GraphiQL 2 now. Or maybe 3, but we don't even need to think about that yet. Yeah. So we could totally, if you want to redo any of that, if you want to just say, hey, I decided to redo the GitHub Projects Beta dashboard like this, and now we have like a bug project, and then we have the GraphiQL develop, because we can create multiple projects. I decided to dump everything into one project, but you can just tear out everything that you like. Just do it how you want. Just play with it. Make a new project, maybe a new beta project that you like that works better.
Maybe something to for people to look at and just to compare to. I just don't want to. I don't want to.
If you have to delete actually save it, but you could just put it as like archived, or something, like put a label on it and then create a new one, right? You could do that if you want. But because I think I had, there is like a kind of like little roadmap I captured there. Like these are the ones I want to put in the roadmap. But yeah. But I think it works in a way where you apply the bulk labels to do. I can't remember even how I set all that up. But yeah, feel free to create a new one that you want to propose, like a new approach. And maybe there's multiple. Maybe you want to have a bug tracker project that's separate, or maybe you just have a tab for bugs. Whatever you want to do. Yeah, but the tabs are cool. It's just like you just set a couple filters for each tab, and yeah.
I'm not sure that I can add a new project here.
Oh, let me double check your permissions then.
Yeah, I can only view, so I can only see the
okay. I need to give you
roadmap.
I need to give you permissions real quick. Let me find my stuff. All right. You've officially been made an admin. You have MFA enabled for GitHub, right?
Oh yeah, totally.
Good.
Isn't it required now?
I think it's required. Yeah. I'm just remembering the old days. Okay, great. I figured you would. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, now you have, I think you have permission for that. Maybe we can create a different role or add permissions to maintainer role. But maybe it's just like create and delete project, and you probably can do everything else as a maintainer. But I'll make you.
Yeah,
admin.
I'm going to spend some time going through that current like roadmap project that's in there just to reset my bearings there.
Yeah.
Before I do
Yeah.
anything. Because
I'm
there's a
trying
lot
to
of
see
stuff
it.
there's a lot of stuff that's in there that's good. It's just it's out of context now because it's a graphical 2 roadmap, but like we're there, and so we need to sort of shift. You've got it filtered in such a way that all we need to do is rename it and like just change the way that we just need to recontextualize it. And I think it's
Okay.
plenty fine. We also need to go in
And update it.
Yeah, update it. Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't think I've updated this list in like over a year or almost 2. I think this could be 2 years old. So like, yeah, there's probably a lot of new stuff. But this is a good way to start organizing the ancient feature requests that we've probably already resolved or can easily just pick off now that we've made these changes. So,
Well,
but also
there really can't be, outside of like the 3 or 4 big feature initiatives that we talked about last month that are sort of currently like all in various stages of being in progress. I don't think there's graphical 2 and the work that Thomas did basically like closed a whole swath of feature requests.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So I think it's really just the bigger ones, right? The new sort of tentpole stuff, which is the new visual, Operation Builder, Monaco,
results plugin and results kind of serializer
plugin, any kind of a plugin thing. Sure. Yeah.
Like, so, and I want those, like when they're on the roadmap and you see something like render results as, Markdown, render results as JSON 5, render results as whatever. Remember, those are all meant to be closed for an RFC for a results plugin, right? So like, you don't like some of those that are on there, don't interpret them literally. Maybe read the comments, and maybe I suggested how it could be pluginified. But if it's something that's like really specific, and you're like, that seems really specific for the roadmap, like then you see, maybe ask, or even just ask in the comments if I don't say how, or someone else doesn't. It's like, how did you imagine this as being part of the plugin API, or how did you like? Do you see a wider use case that we can honor that would include this? Or something, So yeah, like, but also if it's just like, this is obviously not important, or there's a better way to do this also. Yeah, because we didn't really know what the plugin API was going to look like. We just said, hey, this could probably be a plugin. A potential plugin label is the one we use for that. So there's a bunch of old ones that people used to go through, and that was like one of the triage things we used to do, was just mark things as enhancement or potential plugin, because we were deciding, is this something that we can enhance in 1x or that we can do in a 2x plugin? Or back then it was in 1x, because 1.0 was going to be Monaco and everything. It's fine though. The roadmap we have has been beautiful, and people are so happy. And yeah, plans rarely happen as you plan, but it's lucky when they still work out magically, So,
well, there's so much thinking and there's already been so much effort to into the projects here, and at least to label things and to get them sort of into buckets that are so close to where they need to go. I just think that in the last 5 or 6 months, right, since 2 was launched, and we all in some ways began to coalesce around bigger kind of tentpole features that were just bigger than little tiny kind of very specific things. this is all super helpful that this is already done because it fits really well into those existing buckets, right? So like plug in API or plug in something, you can just say like that's a project. And then inside of that, you can filter for our the plugin namespaces, our plugin types, right? Pane plugins, sidebar plugins, whatever, however we
Exactly.
want. We can
The
begin
type
to
key.
move,
Yeah.
we can begin to move this already labeled and tagged issues and whatnot into those buckets. Maybe that'll help.
Yes.
Maybe that'll help because it's already done.
Yep.
It just needs to get massaged.
Right. Yeah. It's
Well,
just like yeah.
I'm gonna focus on because I've just got a lot of momentum on this replacing context with store thing. I'm gonna hit that over the next couple of days and get some code in, and then I think, like you suggested, we really need to roundtable how we're going to roadmap and talk about feedback. I do think that an open feedback for 2.0 sticky discussion is a really, really good idea because there hasn't been a lot of feedback in Discord, right? It just kind of like worked, which was phenomenal. But so like getting
yeah, I was waiting for the flood of bug tickets.
I was too. I remember saying specifically, I will be available. It was the middle of August. I will be available, and it was minimal, which is great. But we do need to get feedback. So
me and Tomas smashed some right away, or squashed some right away.
Were there a couple?
So a couple bugs that came in from the initial flat 2.0 release, but then we solved it. It was solid because there was a lot of people, even on like CDN bundle versions, that just, you know, at next or at latest or whatever on CDN. So like if they were on at latest, then they would have been all of a sudden 2.0 overnight. They wouldn't have gotten any canaries, right? So, and that was the, like in our docs and everything, the CDN example uses unpackage at latest. So yeah, they literally got the 2.0 upgrade. Like you can see the stats for it. It's there. I think some people probably had to pin the version because something or whatever they did broke, but most people, it seems to be, yeah, it's very smooth. But yeah, we should get more feedback, and I think we'll get a lot of feedback on plugin APIs. And now I want to do this cool feature, and that's fine if that all gets dumped into one discussion, because then we can just, each thread that starts where it's like, oh, I really want this plugin or whatever, we just create a new issue for it, or we just tell them that there's already an issue for it and close that discussion, you know, or that little thread in the bigger discussion. But yeah, it'll be good. Yeah, one place. And then that way it also creates a, like, I think you were just saying this, like it creates a place where you can see someone saying something that you're already saying without having to search in GitHub issues.
There's just so much context around this, around GraphiQL as a project, and it's layered in these. It's just there. It's a big monorepo project, and it has a very long and sort of convoluted history because of the COVID, disaster. That I mean, I feel like I've been hanging out in this community for 8 or 9 months now, and I still don't feel like I understand the full history, which is surprising.
Neither do I. Honestly, it's kind of cloudy, like who actually created GraphiQL. I'm pretty sure it was Lee, but it could have been like a colleague first created the repo and copied his code into it. I have no idea. Or like they were all like, I saw a little documentary about them and they were all working on it together. It's like, there's yeah, it's interesting to think about. And I've accidentally kind of borked some of the Git history through the years too, so some of it's not even yeah. But you actually, I think you can still see the original internal commits from Facebook in the very beginning of the the Git tree.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, there's also issues and discussions from like 5 and 6 and 7 years ago that are they're not closed.
We should like go all the way back too.
That's what I'm.
We keep doing that.
That's what I was suggesting, was like, go click the last button in the navigation row and go through. There's one like from
Those are
Lee,
the ones that used to be the hardest, or were just like open feature requests because you couldn't close them yet. And now a lot of them we can probably. Yeah. Or we could just say, there's a way you could do this with the SDK. Here's a link to the SDK. If you have questions, ask in the Discord. That's another one that we can say. Like if it seems like it's a custom case where it's like they're doing something highly customized or use case specific they're requesting, then just say this can be done with the SDK, this can be done with the plugin, or we plan on doing this with the plugin, you know, or whatever, you know? Yeah, it's like even just labeling it in a quick sentence is all you need. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, I need to go.
Yeah, Ricky, this has
because
been
my
super
bladder's
helpful.
calling.
I'm
Yeah.
really glad that you popped in and gave me some direction here. I feel a lot better about it, and it's also nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. Yeah, I'm glad to help, and always just amazed by what the community is able to do to make this project thrive, no matter how much I am involved. But I do plan on, yeah, helping out more once I wrap up some things. But
Cool. Well, I hope to get some code in the next couple of days and start to give some folks some ideas of what replacing context might look like.
okay.
And I'm gonna get to it. I appreciate everything. I really do.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, also, remind me to get you the Twitter credentials so you can solicit feedback too.
Yeah, I have feelings about Twitter, like a lot of people do, especially in the last couple of weeks. I'm not sure that. Well, I mean, I know you're correct in that there's a lot of people in the community, this community specifically, that are paying attention to it, and it's a great place for it. I think I've pulled back from the prototype over the last like couple of weeks, and I haven't really spent a lot of time in it. I think we discussed I want to get the Figma file just cleaned, which I haven't done yet. There's a lot of stuff that's in there that just needs to get explained better inside the Figma file. And then I think in terms of like the prototype, the live prototype that's running right now, like I think it's in a good place. But before we start really hitting the community for feedback, like you've been suggesting, I really want to get the Figma file ready to go so that that there can be a lot of explaining done there. So it's on my list. I just haven't had time to get to it. So I do appreciate you suggesting that we use Twitter, and I want to do that. I just also want to make sure that I'm not preempting discussion that isn't ready to be had yet. I mean, there's already enough talk about the visual query builder, and there's enough out there for people to have opinions, and I need to get the Figma file done first, basically.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks for doing all this. This is all so important, and I'm kind of useless when it comes to Figma files, so I'm glad you're here. And
well, this one, the one that the Figma file that I've been working on is I'll have notes and stuff in it for how to use it. It's actually the way that I've got it set up with like a light theme and a dark theme. It's really simple to just kind of go between the two. I think it's easier to use because it's super well organized than a lot of other Figma files. So I hope that it encourages everybody to like get in and actually play with it. So you'll see it when I'm done. I'll obviously share it.
Great, awesome. And what else was I gonna say? Okay, yeah. For anyone who's listening, if we would love it, and you don't have to. Well, I mean, yeah. What was I gonna say? Oh, for anyone who's listening, I think we both have GitHub sponsors set up. I do. Do you, John?
I do not. I need to. It's probably a good idea.
Okay, well, Safety John here, our friend Jonathan Awesome, will be setting up his GitHub sponsors soon, and will also gladly accept donations. But also, if you're representing a company and you're not a member of the GraphiQL Foundation yet, but you would like to sponsor this work in a like a big way, a big officious way, then contact the GraphiQL Foundation, because there's going to be grant program for us and for anyone in the community who wants to submit a grant proposal to improve our tooling or other tooling in the GraphiQL ecosystem. So yeah, consider having your company become a member, but also if you want to give me a few G's and John a few G's to keep the fires burning, let us know. Yeah, or just, yeah, it'd be nice. But you know, anyways, yeah, just a little shout out.
Great pitch, Ricky.
Or even a few, like a couple 20s, you know, anything helps.
All right.
Cool. All right, thank you, and thank
Thanks
you to the
again.
community and the hundreds of people that will watch this video.
Sure.
Reach out in Discord, just discussions, issues, whatever. Yeah, love you all. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.